My name is Timothy Peterkin, and you're watching EMP.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Bonnie Crusader, and you're watching Everyday Live Music and Photography. And I'm with
Timothy Peterkin.
And I'm here at Peterkin Law Firm in Red Springs, North Carolina. I appreciate you, sir, taking the time out to allow me to interview you, and I just have a couple of questions for you.
My first. You have a couple of pages there, but okay.
No, it's not that much, I promise. My first question is, why did you decide to become a lawyer?
I decided to become a lawyer partly because I wanted to make sure I was always able to represent myself and make sure that I was going to have legal information I needed. I wanted to go into the business industry, and you need legal counsel, and I wanted to make sure that I could have that, and what better way to do it than to be your own legal counsel. I also saw issues. I was growing up in this community that I wanted to be a part of fixing, and becoming an attorney was a way I was able to stand up for people in those issues.
Okay, so what is it about the law that you love?
I can move that. If you want to just hit that button, if you don't mind. What do I love about the law? Well, I love that it actually touches all aspects of our lives, and so lawyers can be a part of a lot of different things. You can contact a lawyer if you have been denied Social Security benefits, or if you've been kicked out of your home, or if you're dealing with custodial issues, and so it touches. There's no one who is impacted by what the law is saying.
Okay, so I understand you used to teach it as well.
That's right.
How did you like doing that?
I loved it. I taught undergraduate students, and I taught law students at North Carolina Central University for about 7 years.
Okay. So why did you decide to come back home to practice?
I wanted to be closer to my family, some aging and elderly family members, and it's easier to go check on them when you work down the street versus 2 or 3 hours away.
Okay. Is there any pros and cons about practicing law in the place and where you grew up at?
A pro would be that there's a trust factor that's been established because half of my clients knew or grew up with my parents, for example, and so they sort of feel connected to you. So that would be a pro. I think the con is sort of like when I was teaching, students will defer to me as Mr. Peterkin, but when I come back here, I'm Mr. Peterkin's son. Versus, so it's sort of different to get people who saw you when you were a teenager to acknowledge that you are a professional. It can be a little challenging, but it's workable.
Okay. I was wondering if you can touch a little bit on about the current elections that's taking place. I don't know if you are allowed to talk about it, or can you touch on anything?
The current election today, or you mean next year?
Today.
Today, okay. Well, I'm excited because we're voting. I know that it means a lot. I think that there probably needs to be a lot more education about what goes on in the non-presidential elections so that people understand the importance of what's going on. The voter turnout is usually terrible, but that's because of a lack of education. And I've worked with some campaigns in our town, just to sort of encourage that education piece. Like, what do these people do? That's some of the questions we'll get. Like, why should I vote? What are they going to do? We're in our town right now. We're voting for the mayor and for the town commissioners, and they said like 300 pages of town ordinances that they approve that govern our lives, that govern very small versus big things that happen to us every day. It governs such as like when can you take your trash out? I mean, this is your life that you're dealing with here, and they're the ones who make those decisions. They're the ones who appoint the chief of police, for example. I mean, so it touches you in a very close way, but a lot of people may not know that. So we estimate there won't be more than 700 people who get to vote and decide who the leaders of our town are, and that's kind of a big deal.
And that was pretty much leading to my next question. I think you kind of touched on it as far as how many I would say, how many the current state of young black voters in this town are there? Are you concerned about it? Because obviously you said that it's not enough voting period because people just don't know. But as far as the youth are concerned,
Well, it turns out like the older you get, the more you know, and so it is sort of common to find that the older voters are more committed voters. So they'll be the ones who will stand out in line. They'll be the ones who will come out in the rain. If they'll come out to vote for the mayor versus people who will come out next year and vote for president. And so it's not just black, it's really an age thing because we're just not aware. You learn things as you get older. And so I think as far as the age demographic, we'll see a very small young vote come out, but that doesn't mean they don't care. It means they don't know, which was our responsibility to educate them so they could appreciate. I think they know that voting for president is important, maybe voting for governor is important, but when you keep going down that list, is it important to vote for your state senator and that sort of thing? The other thing that a lot of young people will say is, I don't know who these people are, so I don't know what they do, so how could I go and I'm being presented with a choice, vote for A versus B, and I don't know who those people are and what they do. So I understand that. I wouldn't want to vote if I didn't understand who the people were either.
so how do you what do you think the best thing to do as far as to get the word out to the youth that they need to take part in this important act of voting in their community?
It's up to all of us, particularly though our elected officials, I think the people who are running for office could engage in more effort to explain that. But the problem is you see the impact of it after the fact. We have, for example, in our town, this noise ordinance, okay? And I've had clients in my firm that I represent who've been charged criminally with a violation of the town's noise ordinance. So when did they know there was a noise ordinance? When they got charged with it, right? So at that point, you're already going down this path, and they realize, oh, the town could have voted to change the noise ordinance, but they didn't. The town, I proposed to the town leadership that they create written warnings so people will know that it's actually a crime, a class 3 misdemeanor to violate a noise ordinance, you see. The town declined to do that. And so the person who got charged with it only learns about these things after the fact. And that's when they realize, wow, maybe it is important because now I'm standing before a judge about to have a criminal record because I drive around town playing my music too loudly. And so it is important, but they don't learn about it until it's too late.
Okay. Kind of switching topics a little bit, but not really. I just want to get your opinion on how do you feel about the police brutality that's going on around the country on let me say black people, young black people, the police brutality in general. What's your thoughts on it?
My concern has always been education. Every year after Trayvon Martin died, I host a Trayvon Martin lecture, which is me and other law professors and attorneys. We create a forum around the state in like 5 or 6 different locations to educate people about what self-defense laws are. I think that the issues that are going on with police brutality are sort of bigger than I can deal with, but I can make sure that you know what your rights are when you're interacting with a police officer. I think that's within my ability to do. And so I focused on that because I think part of it is a lack of information. A police officer approaches someone and asks for their ID, and the person doesn't know, well, do I have to give him my ID or not, right? The officer pulls you over, says, get out of the car. Well, do you have to get out of the car or don't you? And so those sort of questions, I think some of it, a small part of it, is people not knowing what to do or what they're able to do. The police officer says, can I search your vehicle? Do you have to say yes to the search? What does that mean if you say no? And so those, I think a lot of people in our community simply don't know what to do. And you heard the wrong information because I'll tell you, you actually do have to show your ID. But you don't have to let them search your car. I mean, it's sort of and then this other idea about what self-defense means when the victim becomes the aggressor because they've engaged in conduct that was deemed to be too far. And so I think those are sort of things that are within our ability as lawyers to at least help our community understand. There was this one example where, do you remember the bus driver in, I think it was like Ohio, who got into the altercation with the little girl on the bus?
Yes.
And he ultimately was fired. He was trying to figure out, why was he fired? And I'd used that in my class, and I was teaching my students. This little girl, I forget what she did to him. She hit him, she spit on him, she did something bad to him, okay? And then she took 3 steps back. Then he stood up and came towards her. But you understand, when she took those 3 steps back, that meant that the altercation was over. But he was in the heat of the moment, like a human being, you know. He was in the heat of the moment, and he gets up and he approaches her. And when he hits her, guess what? That's not self-defense. You have now assaulted her. You can't retaliate. You have to, the law only lets you defend yourself. And so stuff like that, I think that I can help deal with. The other stuff I think is bigger than my purview. I think there are huge issues regarding valuing lives, but I think that that's going to require a generational change. That's going to require humongous effort on all of our parts.
So why do you think when black people are getting pulled over or getting stopped by the police, why do you think it? Because a lot of police would say, well, if they would just comply, none of this stuff would happen. So why do you think black people won't comply with the police once pulled over or stopped? Do you think is it a cultural thing? Do you think?
Well, I'm not sure that it's just that black people are not complying. I don't think that's fair. To comply doesn't mean you lose all your rights. The Fourth Amendment says you have the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizures, and that there's a warrant requirement, okay? And so an officer stops me and says, can I search your vehicle? I say, no, sir, you cannot. That doesn't mean that I've done anything wrong. Then I think those aren't the issues that we've been saying. We've been saying, like, this young lady smoking in her vehicle, officer, stop smoking. You don't have to stop smoking in your vehicle. You're recording the police officer with your camera. The officer, you can't record me. Well, that's not true. Yes, you can. The U.S. Supreme Court has said you have the right to videotape stuff that's going around in your personal presence. And so, an officer may not like it, but that does not mean that a person is not complying. And so, for the question to be, the black people should comply, that's not true, because yeah, I can comply, but it depends on what the law says. So it's complicated, because the other thing would be, we were teaching people maybe a few years ago that you could use your cell phone when you interact with the police. Now there's an argument that some cell phones have hidden weapons, and so the officer is concerned. We obviously don't want officers to be in danger or killed or whatever, and so it's figuring out that balance, you know. Must I put my cell phone down when the officer stops me? No. But if the officer feels that he's at risk for being harmed, then he has officers, when they feel their life is at risk, they are trained to stop the risk. What does that mean? That really means to kill that risk, right? Because if I have a gun, how do you stop me from killing you? You only know that I'm stopped when I'm dead. So.
Okay. So what is it about the law that you don't like or dislike, since you've been an attorney and been teaching law?
Well, under the same topic we were talking about, I think that our state legislature, they have to make some hard decisions and tell us what the answers to some of these questions are, so that we're not guessing. For example, the state legislator who writes our state laws, they could write a law that says you may do X, Y, and Z when a police officer stops you. That could include calling someone, you know, that could include cutting on your video camera. We could create a law that simply says that. Because what you'll find is that there are a bunch of people who got charged with what's called resisting and delaying a police officer because they tried to record. And the officer said, well, you're stopping me from doing my job, and they get charged, and there's this whole big debate about it, you know? Well, our leaders could actually create laws that clarifies that. What are the rights that I have whenever I'm stopped by a police officer? What should I be allowed to do? So it's not necessarily I like it or I don't like it. I just want clarity. All I want ever since Trayvon Martin died, it made me really think about um, how I was going to explain what that meant to my nephews. You know, what does that mean? What can you do when someone approaches you? And if you take George Zimmerman's version of the facts as true, okay, just take it as true for a moment, he was right. You see, but his facts were, I approached someone that I was concerned about. Okay, well, you can and cannot do that. Who cares? But then in the midst of me talking to this person, he became aggressive with me, and at some point, he's beating me up.
Mm-hmm.
I was afraid for my life, and so I took out a gun and I shot him because I thought he was going to kill me. Well, if you think someone's going to kill you, you can take out a gun and shoot them. You see? And again, that's assuming what his version is. Facts are true. The bottom line is, Florida actually did a very good job in explaining what stand your ground meant. North Carolina has done a very complicated job of explaining what stand your ground meant. In North Carolina, you can stand your ground, but only in 3 places: in your home, your place of business, and your vehicle. And that's it. And any other place, if you have a fear of safety, you have a duty to retreat. If you can retreat safely, what does that even mean, right? I mean, students asked this question at last year's Trayvon Martin Forum, and they said, "Well, I'm a student, so where is my place of business? If I'm in my dorm, I know that's my home. If I'm in a classroom, that's my place of business. Well, there's a long walk between my dorm and my classroom. And if someone approaches me in that long walk there, does that count as a stand your ground area or not?" And we had elected officials there, and they couldn't answer the question. And my thing is, I don't care what the answer is. Either it's yes or it's no. The problem is, I don't want a 19-year-old standing there being confronted by someone who he's concerned that's going to cause them harm and not knowing what they're supposed to do. Because if you will answer the question, I will spend all the energy I have going out and educating the public, but our legislator has not answered the question. So we don't know the answer. So that's what I think is the problem, is that they have to make hard decisions and actually answer these questions so that we can go out and educate the community, and I can say with certainty that this is the law and this is not the law. The other thing that I think is disturbing is, do you remember Merce Alexander? She was charged with killing someone in Florida right after George Zimmerman because she fired warning shots?
Yes.
Okay. Well, in North Carolina, we have followed the same rules as Florida. North Carolina Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the state, has said that if you fire warning shots, and this is a quote, clearly you are not concerned about your safety. So what does that mean? If you put a gun up like this and fire in the air, that means you're not concerned about your safety. So so you cannot plead self-defense if you put a gun in the air. So what do you have to do? That's self-defense, you see?
Yeah.
But I don't like that at all. So you ask what I like. I think that's terrible. I think that it's very reasonable that if someone breaks into my house, it's very reasonable for me to fire warning shots to let them know that I have a gun. And if I happen to hit someone in the process, my intent was to protect myself. I'd rather not shoot the person, you know. But our state has not allowed that to be self-defense. And I think that that's disturbing. I think if more people knew that, they would probably be bothered by that too, because it's not valuing human life.